the boy who would shake the world. They called him Temujin, a boy born on the cold, endless steppe, a boy who would one day make kings tremble, cities burn, and maps be redrawn forever. But at first, he had nothing. No gold, no army, not even the loyalty of his own clan. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned by rivals. His family was cast out, abandoned to starvation in the unforgiving Mongolian wilderness. They survived on roots, berries, and whatever small game they could catch. And the boy learned early that on the steppe you ate, or you were eaten. As he grew into a teenager under constant threat, at one point his half-brother claimed leadership of the family. Temujin, still a youth, killed him, not for hatred but because leadership was survival. It was here, in this ruthless crucible, that Temujin's ideas began to form. Unlike other tribal leaders, he didn't care about noble birth. He valued loyalty, merit, and competence. If you could ride, fight, and follow orders, you belonged in his ranks. One by one, he gathered followers, warriors who saw in him something more than just another chief. They saw a man who might unite the eternally feuding steppe tribes into something greater, something unstoppable. By his early 20s, Temujin began forging alliances, breaking the centuries-old cycle of betrayal and revenge that plagued the steppe. He fought not just with swords but with promises, and those promises were kept. Soon, his army was no longer just Mongols. It included Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, enemies from generations past now bound by loyalty to him. In 1206, the tribes met at a great council called a Kurultai. There they proclaimed him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The boy who once hunted marmots to survive was now master of all Mongolia. But the steppe could not hold him forever. Paused beyond the mountains and rivers of his homeland lay the mighty empire of the dragon, and Genghis Khan was already hungry for it. The dragon and the Wolf China-esque great Jin dynasty had long viewed the steppe peoples as little more than a nuisance, raiders to be paid off or crushed. Behind their massive walls, the Jin believed they were safe, but the wolf had grown too strong. In 1211, Genghis Khan led an army south, not just horsemen, but a living storm. His warriors could ride 100 miles in a day, each carrying multiple horses to stay fresh. They had perfected the art of feigned retreat, luring enemies into pursuit only to wheel around and destroy them. The Jin met them with vast numbers, confident in their heavy armor and fortified cities. The Mongols simply went around the strongholds they couldn't breach, cutting off supplies, isolating each city like prey separated from the herd. And then came the siege engines. Genghis had no shame in stealing the best ideas from his enemies. Chinese engineers were captured, spared, and put to work building catapults, siege towers, and terrifying fire weapons. Within 2 years, the Jin heartlands lay open. The Great Wall, that ancient symbol of Chinese security, had failed. The wolf had leapt over it. But Genghis Khan's ambition didn't stop with the Jin. In the west, the Khwarezmian Empire, stretching across Persia, Central Asia, and into the Middle East, had insulted him. He had sent a caravan to trade. The Shah had it seized, its merchants killed. Genghis Khan sent 3 ambassadors to demand justice. The Shah killed one and mutilated the others. That was a mistake. The wolf turned his gaze from China to Persia, and the hunt began. Cities turned to ash. The march into the Khwarezmian Empire in 1219 was more than a war. It was a storm breaking over the desert. The Mongols crossed hundreds of miles of hostile terrain, moving faster than any army the Shah had imagined possible. City after city fell. Bukhara, a jewel of Central Asia, surrendered after its gates were battered down. Genghis Khan entered its grand mosque, climbed the pulpit, and declared, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." From Bukhara to Samarkand, the pattern was the same. Resist and the city would be annihilated. Surrender and you might live. It was calculated terror, a weapon as sharp as any sword. Stories of entire cities wiped out raced ahead of the Mongol armies, breaking the will of defenders before the first arrow was loosed. The Shah fled, pursued across his own empire, dying in exile on a remote island. But even in victory, Genghis Khan was not finished. He sent his generals into Russia, crushing armies on the Kalka River. He sent others into India, burning their way to the Indus. Yet the Mongol conquests were not just about destruction. They opened trade routes, safeguarded caravans, and for the first time in centuries, merchants could travel from Europe to China under one empire's watch. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, had begun. But peace would not last. Genghis Khan died in 1227. His cause of death still a mystery. A fall from a horse, an arrow wound, or an illness no one knows. His burial place remains hidden to this day, but his heirs would carry on his storm. The world on fire under Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons, the Mongol Empire exploded outward. In less than a generation, they had taken all of Persia, most of Russia, the Middle East, and the heart of China. And then came Batu Khan, Genghis's grandson, leading the Golden Horde into Europe. In 1241, Mongol armies smashed Poland at Legnica and crushed Hungary at Mohi. Panic spread across the continent. From Paris to Rome, people whispered that the end of the world was coming on horseback. Only the death of the great Khan Ogedei in Mongolia stopped them. The Mongol leaders withdrew to elect a new ruler, and Europe breathed again. In the east, another grandson, Kublai Khan, turned his attention fully to China. By 1271, he had founded the Yuan dynasty, ruling as emperor of China itself. His court glittered with wealth and foreign visitors. Even Marco Polo claimed to have seen it. But expansion could not last forever. The empire stretched too far, and rivalries between branches of the royal family fractured it. By the late 13th century, the once united Mongol Empire split into Khanates, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Still, their legacy remained written across the map. Borders had shifted, kingdoms had fallen, and the age of the Mongols had carved deep scars and opportunities into the world. The map they left behind by the 14th century, the Mongol Khanates began to fade. In China, rebellion toppled the Yuan and brought the Ming to power. In Persia, the Ilkhanate crumbled under civil war. Even in the steppes, the once mighty Golden Horde splintered into smaller states. But the Mongol conquests had already changed the course of history. They had connected east and west on a scale never seen before, turning the Silk Road into a highway of goods, ideas, and even diseases. The Black Death traveled along Mongol trade routes to devastate Europe. They had shifted political boundaries, toppled ancient dynasties, and forced entire civilizations to rethink how they fought wars. Gunpowder, siege techniques, and even paper money spread in their wake. Perhaps most lasting of all was their lesson in mobility and adaptation. The Mongols had no fixed capital in the beginning, no massive bureaucracy, no immovable walls. They were a reminder that in history, the most powerful force is often the one that can change fastest. And so, a boy from the windswept steppe became the architect of the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. If you've just ridden through this storm of history with me, from the yurts of Mongolia to the gates of China, the deserts of Persia, and the battlefields of Europe, then saddle up with us again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories, because there are more forgotten stories waiting to be told.